Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, presented in part by Total Sports Enterprises. My name is Joe Kuzma. I am joined by, my tag team partner, Brian E. Roach. And, folks, I have some good news to report. Both of us appear to be in good cardiovascular condition and did not have a heart attack from Sunday's 20-15 Pittsburgh Steelers victory over the Detroit Lions, moving to 6-2, headed into a bye week. How's your ticker doing over there, Brian?
Well, not too bad, although there was a point in time where I thought I was pulling a Sanford son and going, "I'm coming for you, Elizabeth! I'm coming home!" But it didn't quite happen.
That's one of my favorite shows. And you know what? There's a very good quote that Fred Sanford used to say that I'm a fan of. And I want to say a lot of people are thinking the same thing. I think it was like 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7 on that last drive, the second play. People are looking at Todd Haley and saying, "You big dummy." But you know what? I understand what they were trying to do there. This would be the throw that was like just errant and nowhere near Antonio Brown. It's the same play they ran in Kansas City in the playoffs that sealed the deal. Everyone's expecting a run there, just feed Bell. But geez, man, it left like a minute and 40 seconds. It gave Detroit the opportunity to not burn one of their timeouts. And when you're looking at this 5-point lead, which ended up being a 5-point victory, a lot of people think everything we do is sunshine and rainbows sometimes, but for lack of better terms, my butthole is getting really tight during this game, man. There's just no other way to say it. But before we dig in a little bit further, I want to let everyone know Total Sports Enterprise is one of our partners and sponsors of this podcast and various other things. So there is a player of the game or a player spotlight or the total impact player of the game, and we could all guess who that is, Juju Smith-Schuster. And whenever the Steelers win, one of these game balls are handed out. There is a discount for merchandise over at tscshop.com, so look for our article sometime Monday morning. Usually it launches, and for about 24 hours you'll have a discount code. There's been like half off Bell jerseys, there's been stuff for the entire defense, and of course they have an event coming up on December 9th with a plethora of Pittsburgh Steelers running backs, including Barry Foster, who's the oddball of all that, but one of my favorite players growing up. So be sure to check all of that out, as I know you will, Brian. But that player of the game, Juju Smith-Schuster, I think a lot of people are already saying bye Felicia, but instead of Felicia, there's an asterisk there, and then the asterisk trailed by Martavis Bryant.
Yeah, I'm not ready to do that yet, but this is there's clearly a great game by Juju Smith-Schuster, highlighted, of course, by the 97-yard record-breaking touchdown, which happened right after I had been complaining about Ben's accuracy. He throws the best ball he threw all night. Perfect touch pass, right, hitting Juju right in stride. And the only complaint I have is stop looking back at everybody. Just run, man.
Yeah, and for saying you big dummy to Todd Haley, let me tell you, that play call that sealed a deal for the victory formation, the little pitch play to Juju to end the game, was one of the most brilliant things I've seen an NFL team do, probably the entire weekend of football. Got to watch quite a few games, Red Zone Channel, everything else. Saw the Browns game, which was absolutely miserable, watching them play the Vikings. Like, neither one of those teams wanted to win, which is usually the case if you're watching on a Thursday night or you're watching in London. Unfortunately, Thursday night we had to put up with the Ravens pitching a shutout, and everybody probably like, whoa, why doesn't our defense do something like that? Well, let me tell you, folks, besides the 7-catch, 193-yard and touchdown performance by Juju Smith-Schuster, the Steelers defense was, what's that word that Zach Celadonio always says to us, is lit. They were lit tonight.
Well, Well, their red zone defense certainly was. There's no question about that. For some reason, the Steelers just felt compelled to allow the Lions to get as close as possible to the end zone before they said, no further, that's it. You can't go and get in.
It's kind of like Gandalf, Lord of the Rings, and he says, you shall not pass. And that's that was it, man. They laid the smack down. And Jim Caldwell even trying to go for it on fourth down. Holy cow, that sub package, I absolutely hate it with the goal line thing where they pull the corners and put in LJ Fort and Tyler Matakevich, and usually somebody's lost. They have no idea what's going on. And Vince Williams just rose to the occasion on that package, if not once, but I think the second time when he had the big stop on a third down near the end of the game, they actually left the corners in there. It makes you sweat. It makes you sweat. But it was eventually going to happen. You were going to see a team, and thank God it wasn't a New England Patriots team, that's going to expose some of this zone. They've been doing this zone coverage still. All that talk during training camp of this man coverage stuff, it's still not materializing. You're going to find soft spots in it. And, of course, the other team is stocked full of, some guys are millionaires, and there's professional football players over there, and they're doing all, if they're a good team, or at least somewhat, you would think being professionals, within reason, they're doing all the same things the Steelers are trying to do to win the game as well. So you guys always got to give credit where credit's due. But Matt Stafford, 27-45, 423 yards. I didn't think he would get that much, but I kind of felt maybe about 300 or so. But I really thought he was going to be on his rear. I made a bold prediction of 7 times, and he really only got sacked, I think, once the entire game, which was somewhat disappointing. I was a little irritated. And before I kick it back over to you, Brian, just the 3-man rush all night, maybe 4. They didn't really bring a whole lot of heat, and they're just lucky in the circumstances that it worked out the way it did in certain situations.
Yeah, the truth is that if you go back, and I think we both will when we start to look at the game again, the first half, they brought heat. They brought blitzes, and Shazier was coming in on either side of the ball. They would bring Hilton in on some sides, but the Lions were picking them up, and they changed in the second half, and Butler went with a 3-man, at most a 4-man rush. And it was driving everyone crazy because this is not a good offensive line. Brian Mihalik, who we're all familiar with because he's an ex-Steeler practice squad guy, is their starting left tackle, and that's the third string guy. And you know what? They couldn't take advantage of it, and that was really surprising to me. I expected the defensive line to be dominant, and it took them to have their back up against the wall before they were willing to do it. I mean, you were talking about Vince Williams, but let's give some props to old Jay Wobble down there, too. Mm-hmm. Javon Hargrave on one of those big stops, combining with Vince Williams for a huge hit. And then later in the game, when Stafford's trying to throw and Shazier kicks the ball out of his own hands, Hargrave just drove the center back in to Matt Stafford, making it an impossible throw for him. Some big props to the guys once they got down there, but a bit soft and surprising up until that point. It makes you scratch your head. What was the deal with the pressure that they either couldn't get there or give credit to the Lions? They schemed us really well, I guess.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, I don't even remember his name. Was it TJ Jones? It's like, who is this guy? There's no Kenny Golladay, who we scouted a little bit during the draft, and very little Golden Tate. He was out there, but he was a late arrival in that game, at least on the stat sheet, with his shoulder injury. But Steelers officially 2 sacks. I forgot about Cam Hayward had one early, and then Alu. But yeah, I picked up on Jay Wobble. Just he had a very similar just bull rush at the beginning of the game that was much in the same way that you described, just shoving the center straight back. But I must say, on the other side of things, Ben Roethlisberger not sacked at all again in this game. That's 2 weeks in a row because I don't think the Bengals got to them a week earlier either. And I said the Bengals were going to be a lot like the Lions in many aspects, but I must say Matt Stafford's a heck of a lot better quarterback than Andy Dalton. And quite possibly, Alex Smith didn't play very well, but I got to say that Matt Stafford's probably the best QB that the Steelers have faced so far.
It is. I think it's not even a question that Matt Stafford is the best quarterback they've had to face so far this year. And he probably will be the best quarterback that they have to face up until the point that they face Brady, if they face Brady, down the road in New England, which we assume will be the case when they come to Pittsburgh. But it was an odd game because he definitely picked the Steelers apart. He picked apart the zones, no question about it. But that's what's going to happen when you give somebody that much time, and he had time, and that was what I think was still the most surprising thing about this game. The Steelers made a couple of mistakes in coverage early on. Joe Hayden, for the first time all year, we had to notice him, but then he comes back and immediately makes a great play in the end zone to bat a ball away. So he follows up. Artie Burns was hit and miss a couple times. They let the tight ends run loose, Golden Tate run loose, but I guess, when push came to shove, they did bear down in the red zone. And that, what more can we ask of them, I guess, in a crazy game like this?
Yeah, all the field goals from Matt Prater. And I wanted to point something out. Credit to Chris Collinsworth. He actually said it during the broadcast. I was thinking it. I was texting it, messaging it, not tweeting it because I could only do so much on my phone and try and pay attention to the game. I have crazy family members just going crazy. My one cousin, you got to love him to death. He's like, this is the Bears game all over again. I'm like, no, it's not. They're moving the football. Okay, there's a turnover or two, but they're scoring. They have a lead. You know what I mean? It was just like it was not the same. They weren't even penalized for the longest time in the game, and that was kind of driving me crazy. I think the missing component really on offense. Well, let me go back to what I was going to say about Collinsworth first. Sorry. He was talking about the cover two, and he was talking about the zone coverage, and he was talking about the zone behind the corners and the safety help. And the safety help was kind of non-existent there too. So without rewinding, watching film, the Hayden one to me immediately seemed kind of off, and it seemed kind of off because there was a very similar play, maybe even on the same drive or series on the very next one that happened on the other side of the field with Artie Burns, and in both times I think it was Mike Mitchell who was kind of the safety help over the top there, and they're just pitching it right in between. And I mean, you got guys that are fast, and you got guys that are, Joe Hayden, a very good corner, and somebody's discarded goods there, as they mentioned. One man's trash, another man's treasure. But credit Collinsworth for not only saying that, but they came back like after halftime or something, and somebody had made like a small little video standstill graphic and drew a box and everything. And it happened about 3 times exactly like that during the game, which is why I was really getting anxious at the end. You see Sean Davis holding his ankle. You already know Mike Mitchell was pulled off, and they had Robert Golden out there playing. So now you're going to put Robert Golden and J.J. Wilcox out there, and I was sweating. I was really sweating. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. The one Joe Hayden, because you're absolutely right. There's a bunch of Joe Hayden stuff that people are going to blame him for. That's not necessarily his fault because the safeties are slow coming over. But he bit on a route early, trying to make a play and get a pick. That was real early in the game. It's really the first time all year I can say, yeah, he made a jump on a ball that Matt Stafford just burned him for. That was a totally different thing earlier on, but the case is still there, and you're not kidding. When you lose both your starting safeties at some point in the game, we had questions about Robert Golden. There was a reason he lost. Went back to special teams, and then J.J. Wilcox coming in. That was a little, I don't want to use the same word you used, but let's just say sphincter tightening.
Yeah, and you know what is very interesting, and I've seen this happen a few times, and this is what the real adjustment was in the fourth quarter was they started stacking TJ Watt, and they were putting him basically near the A gap between the center and guard, and it was a game of cat and mouse as to whether or not he would rush. And they were dropping him back almost like he were Ryan Shazier, and nearly got his paws on a ball more than once, as did Shazier. Both of those guys, one of them at least, deserved to have a pick in that game. And it's kind of sad that neither one did, because, I mean, then you seal the deal for sure. The Steelers offense, on the other hand, you have Ben throwing the triple coverage, trying to catch Antonio Brown. I have no idea if somebody just ran the wrong route. Ben just, lost the ball or whatever. And we're talking about accuracy and whatnot. It's like Eli Rogers, geez, squeeze the ball, man. Or how does Ben miss Darius Hayward-Bay? These are all things that would have put a nail in the coffin of this game a lot earlier, where you're not hoping that Golden Tate just drops the ball. It's like, oh, hey, thank you. Here's a gift. So the missing piece for me on the offense of everything. Everyone's going to talk about Juju Smith-Schuster. Antonio Brown, really a pedestrian game for him. Five catches, 70 yards. Le'Veon Bell, 25 carries, 76 yards, and the TD. Only 25 carries. He didn't get to 30, so a little bit less usage. He'd been up to like maybe 35-ish over the last few victories. But in the passing game, he was targeted only 3 times, 2 catches for 5 yards with a 3-yard long. He was non-existent as that kind of wide receiver too, as all the focus shifted over to Juju Smith-Schuster. Maybe a good decoy. Now, will Lev Bell take to Instagram tonight and respond to a troll and say, hey, if you give me the ball more or blah, 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 you know what I mean? So that was kind of the thing that really stuck out to me. I don't know. Was there anything on offense that really stuck out to you as far as somebody else that should have been more involved or something more they could have improved on besides Ben's, the kind of snafus he had?
Yeah, the thing that I mentioned this last week in the GBU article, and it was obvious again this week. Chris Hubbard is not Marcus Gilbert. And even though they didn't give up a sack more than once, Hubbard got blown up on plays. And, it wasn't that they were always that close, but you put Ben off of his spot. He had to move around in the pocket several different times. And he's not the same Ben of old that, and I know Collinsworth pointed this out as well, after contact and after he has to move, he is not as accurate as he's been in the past. So when you've got one side of your line that's essentially caving in and forcing you off your spot, that is still a problem. And that doesn't happen when Marcus Gilbert is out there. Chris Hubbard has done a yeoman's job, but it is noticeable and it is problematic. And I don't think they were able to give him the kind of help this week that they gave him in the second half last week, with David DeCastro kind of helping him out to keep, the Bengals defensive line away from Ben. Other than that, everybody is going to go nuts this week. There's no question about it. Everybody is going to go nuts this week talking about how Juju is the man, and that, Martavis who, that kind of stuff. And I want to point out that, Martavis was there, and when Eli dropped the first ball that should have been a touchdown, that Ben threw right into his hands and he just muffed it. Martavis was one of the first ones over there to get in his head and get in his ear and tell him it was going to be all right. And, he looked like maybe the message is finally going to be received. And, as I talked about last week, I understand the young man's frustration, but I don't think this is a goodbye Martavis. Just imagine a receiving core with an active Martavis, Antonio Brown, and Juju, all three running out routes. If we can get all three of those guys to be in sync and running, man, that's a tough group of receivers. I think Eli Rogers is probably the odd man out, not Martavis Bryant.
Oh yeah, he's going to be searching for the hard hat somewhere. That was what I said. If anybody's going to have, because he already lost the punt job after that muff, and then he was inactive for 2 weeks, and then this drop. I mean, obviously, when you're now inserting DHB and Justin Hunter, who made a very Kobe Hamilton 2016-esque third down conversion, oh geez, I can't even think of like my mind is toast right now. The pattern that he ran, and I'm just like, he ran across the field.
Just a crossing
route. There we go. Man, I'm telling you, fried. Brain is mush. And surprisingly, someone else's brain isn't mush. Speaking of segues and whatnot, you said yeoman, and that's going to be someone's homework assignment to go look up what a yeoman is after you get done listening to this show. So, but the brain mush type thing is, I was looking at this game, and I'm like, I'm wondering what Brian's thinking about the officiating, because it's like they're letting all these things go, and then all of a sudden there's like this little shove off and a touchdown taken off the board with Antonio Brown, and there wasn't a good enough replay for me to be able to be like, okay, 2 hands, totally extended, elbows locked, he got him. You know what I mean? It just seemed like a little bit of like the little kids like play slapping at each other or something. You know, that's the way it looked like, at least, because there wasn't a clear enough replay. But the one that really got me is how Ben Roethlisberger can continue to be skewered out there at times, and there should have been a flag. I made a comment too. If he doesn't turn his body, he's probably hit right in the chin strap, just like Jesse James was, which that flag came out way too late. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, I know we're letting these guys play tonight, which never necessarily isn't a bad thing. You know what I mean? You're either going to call the game tight, you're not going to call it tight. It just sucks it's inconsistent from game to game. But within whistle, first whistle, the final whistle, hey, you know what? If you're consistent within that, I'm cool with that. But geez, man, Ben just got hit like a piñata on that one. I contend if he doesn't turn his body, it's a helmet-to-helmet thing, and that's probably a fine.
Absolutely. And I want to say something about that helmet-to-helmet stuff. You look at the hit on Jesse James by a shorter man going up directly into Jesse James's chin. And then the next series, as the Steelers turn the ball around and the Lions have the ball, Sean Davis is ducking down to try and make a tackle, and the receiver moves his head into the direction where Sean is going. It's a totally different, concept, because people are going to go, oh, well, the Steelers do head-to-head too. That was not an intentional head-to-head hit. He was not trying to hit the guy in the head. Sean Davis is aiming at a lower spot. The receiver ducks down. What are you going to do? That is different than what happened to Jesse James, where the defensive back went directly up into his chin strap. That was obvious. Where he was heading with that hit. And it's just a different dynamic. Both are penalties. I'm not saying it shouldn't have been a penalty, but it's a different mentality. Sean Davis is trying to do the right thing, and the receiver moves into the wrong spot, and there's nothing you can do about that. On the other side, that guy was headhunting as far as I'm concerned. Now, let me say something about the refs. They stink. They always stink. They continue to stink. The refs stink. And they just drive me out of my mind. They stink.
Well, final takeaways from that. Of course. Steelers, 17 first downs. They were 7 of 14 on third down, 50%, a little bit, an uptick getting there. We would like to see that about 2/3 of the way in the 60% range, but you know what? You're talking maybe one conversion. Juju dropping the ball. It makes all the difference there. And it really points left on the board, too. Like I said, the throwing into the triple coverage, and also, Shazier had his mitts on the ball a few times, TJ Watt a few times, maybe could have come away with it, but Le'Veon Bell at the end of the first half, with a very uncharacteristic third time ever in his career, he has fumbled, lost the ball. That sucked. That absolutely sucked, and that's what kept Detroit in the game, among a few other, just goofy things. You're lucky Chris Boswell hit the upright and it bounced in, because it was just like. Yep. I don't know what it is. It's like a force of nature when the team sometimes goes on the road. And don't get me wrong, this Lions team, they look like a playoff team to me. I know that they just dropped to maybe 3-4, but you can't tell me that within their division that the Bears, the Vikings, and now an Aaron Rodgers-less Packers team is going to end up beating them out. Sucks for them. They end up losing this game 5 points, especially with, I think I heard them say on TV too, that this was like one of the biggest offensive outputs without a touchdown scored. So Detroit runs 69 plays on offense to Steelers 60, and everything was pretty much, almost even keel, except that the Lions had about almost 100 yards more passing. The Steelers were penalized 5 times for 37 yards. They turned the ball over twice to the Lions only turning it over once. And I will say this, not getting the points off of the turnovers, that kind of sucked. But the Steelers also didn't win the time of possession. Detroit had about 31 and a half minutes here to 28 and a half of the Steelers. But the biggest thing that just drove me, you want to talk about the thing that really drove me nuts, you want to talk about penalties, you want to talk about discipline, the biggest takeaway, if you're going to make a substitution, get your butt off the field. I mean, Bud Dupree and William Gay, and that was killer. That was almost the backbreaker there. That is something that you can prevent. If you make, if there's a helmet to helmet, a personal, anything aside from somebody throwing a punch like we saw with Ashawn Robinson, and we saw the open mitt with Pouncey, that stuff, you could control that stuff too. Holding, a little more discipline type stuff, things of that nature, those type of things happen in the game. But getting the right amount of guys on the field, sorry, that one's inexcusable for me.
I got to agree with you. It just, in a game like this where that substitution is being made, you're facing a quarterback who's paying attention and who has the ability to see you not, chugging your way off, to kind of la-ti-da your way off the field, Bud, it's a bad look for you, my friend. So, I'll give them credit. In the first half, they really didn't make any of those huge mental errors. They were penalty free, I think, in the first half. But the penalty bug did come back and bite them a little bit in the second half, and some ill-timed miscues that have become the norm and need to kind of stop being the norm. Bad holding penalties when, I don't remember whether the Lions got called for a single holding penalty the entire game. I don't think they did. And I watched several of the replays of Mihalik doing an excellent job of holding without being obvious about it. But it's hey, if you get away with it, it's okay, right?
I thought Pouncey had a real good one, like at the very beginning of the game. I thought he had someone in a headlock, basically a reverse chokehold almost, and with no call. I was very shocked because I'm used to seeing the little beanie things thrown around, and I mean, 'tis the season. I mean, with orange for Halloween and everything else. So we hope the best going forward for all of our trick-or-treaters and whatnot, and we're going to be all over the place in the next week because we don't know what to do. It was tough enough waiting for a Sunday night game. Now you got to wait 2 weeks for the next Steelers game as they enter a bye. So we'll make up some things to talk about as we usually do. We'll talk about some other things that we aren't going to make up and just some general fun. So I think that's about all I have from this game without, beating the proverbial dead horse. You got anything left that we should cover, Brian?
I don't. I think that we've talked it out. My heart can't, after the Ohio State game yesterday and the Steelers game on Sunday, I'm just worn out, man. I'm worn out.
I know the feeling, and I'm really worn out because I just celebrated a birthday, not to toot my own horn, but I kind of went out doing a little bit of brewery hopping, and anyone that follows me on Twitter, I usually check in what I'm drinking, and I probably had about 50 tweets, if that gives you an idea to the amount of alcohol that was in my system over the weekend. And you talk about a ticker not being able to take it, man. I'm too old for that stuff. I am, it put a whooping happen on me. I'm just very happy that the Steelers weren't playing the 9:30 game. With London, I already had a headache, and then when I have to watch the Cleveland Browns, it usually intensifies. It makes it even worse. So it's just the way it is. I got to get my shots in. So until next time, folks, we're looking forward to hearing from you. We still have the fan mail at steelcityunderground.com. We have the hotline 203-900-4 SCU. That's 4728. My name's Joe. His name's Brian. Be safe. Be good. Trick or treat. Smell my feet. Give me something good to eat. We'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.